So one of the features of my channel is, of course, the monthly mock drafts, which usually begin around April time, and you guys really seem to enjoy it, and I really like doing them. And I thought we'd sort of peel the curtain back in this video, because I don't go off power rankings or things like that. I like looking at them and keeping up to date, but I'll trust the people that I talk to, my own research, watching as much under 18s footy as I can to make these sorts of summations. But whereas in previous years you've got Harley Reid that was really easy to pick, and Jason Horne-Francis, and Harry Sheezel was probably an easy one to get, and Colby McKercher last year to North made a lot of sense. But even now this year, with the number one pick being up in the air, and although I'm pretty set in my ways of who I think that should be, there are so many players that are so difficult to mock for a bunch of different reasons. Whether you've got guys that are near the top of the tree that might be injured, whether it's key position players that are fighting for a spot in a draft that is so midfield heavy, maybe some midfielders that are missing some weapons, all these kinds of things. Players can become more difficult than others to find either a natural spot or an easy place to put them in. So I thought I would talk about them. So now that I've done 4 mock drafts so far and preparing for a 5th come the end of August, I thought I would give you my top 6 players in this draft crop that are currently the most difficult to mock draft. Let's go. So one of the best players in this draft is Finn O'Sullivan, and because of his hand injuries, is really difficult to go talent he's provided beforehand versus what he's put on the park now. On potential, Finn O'Sullivan could very definitely be the best player in this draft, and I don't think there are too many people out there that can argue that with poignant points. Whereas, of course, it's very easy for someone to go, no, and move on. That's not really a footy debate then, that's just more kind of a stuff you, right? But I struggle with Finn a little bit because when he was coming through, the people that I talk to and I trust in this draft space go, Daz, you're going to love watching this kid. And then his underage highlights came out and it was like, oh yeah, I love watching this kid. I cannot wait to see what he's going to do this year. And unfortunately, with his hand and his thumb, he just hasn't been able to put the numbers together, the games together, the continuity together at the time of recording. Therefore, the question of where do you compare him in a mock draft? Will a club take him at even 1 or 2? Or could he even fall 6, 7, 8? Now, the answer is probably somewhere in between there, but then you add in things like, where does Levi Ashcroft get bid on? Does someone try to go an earlier bid than suspected for a Leo Lombard? In this kind of scenario, makes it extremely difficult to figure out just where Finn is going to end up. And even in power rankings, where I've seen him at 2, I've seen him at 5, I've seen him at 4. So around that mark is seemingly the consensus, but which club is going to pick him up is going to be interesting. Now, outside of North Melbourne, every other club in that top 8, you would suspect, kind of need a midfielder. So where someone is going to take potential versus output on their draft board come the middle of August, which is just about where we are at the time of recording, is going to be super fascinating. And it makes my job difficult, which I love. Because if drafting mock style was simple, no one would give a shit. But I'm hoping, fingers crossed, praying to whichever entity makes you feel better at night, that Finn has an awesome end of the year. Not only for some clarity selfishly, but also we want to see the best players playing well, whether it's at AFL level, VFL level, or under 18s level. Stuff it. I would even say under 11s level. You want to see the really, really good players play at no matter what age level you are watching. And Finn is a star. But right now, he is being a pain in my ass. So it is what it is. Let's move on. Next one on the list is Jobe Shanahan, who for his VFL debut for the Bombers kicked 4 straight from less than 10 disposals, but you can't ask for anything more than that. 193, 194 centimetres. He is a third tall forward, in my opinion, which means there are a couple of clubs that stand out more than others in where he could end up, as you can probably see on the screen here. But the reason why he is becoming more difficult to mock now is Tom Hawkins is retiring. So usually the mock was who was the first club really out of Carlton, because I don't think the Camporeale brothers are going to be bid on at any point before Carlton's first pick, even if their first pick is about pick 16. I just don't think Ben and Lucas are at that point, so I think Carlton are going to get a first pick. The Bombers and Geelong. But the Bombers now are going to get Isaac Keiko. So you take them out of the equation and it's kind of like Geelong, Carlton. And then you go, well, hang on, a club like St Kilda could look at someone like that, because in a midfield-heavy draft, St Kilda could just get a midfielder in the second and even potentially third rounds, and with the ability to trade up and all these kinds of things, could be a bit of a reach there, even though I love the Harvey Langford fit to the Saints. Jobe, at this point in time, as I kind of said with Finn O'Sullivan, is becoming a pain, which, again, I do not mind, but the point of this video and the point of this list, hardest players to mock, if Jobe is able to prove his ability in the air and on the ground, he is going to become a guy who's not only going to be difficult for me to mock, but a guy who, when I'm watching the draft live, is going to make me think to myself, they could take him here, and then they do, really early, or it's going to be, how is he still on the board? And then if he does get to, say, like, the 22 mark, the early second round mark, you're just thinking, wow, someone's getting a steal. So, really looking forward to seeing how he ends this season, and if he does end up with a rich vein of form, maybe this is pointless and he goes top 10 anyway. But 4 snags in your VFL debut? Yes, please. Sometimes you're hard to mock because you are the only good open player in your position at this point in time, and no one fits that bill more than Joe Berry, because Isaac Keiko is going to end up at the Bombers. Malachi Champion is going to end up at the Eagles, thanks to the Next Generation Academy rules, which are nonsensical, but in the era of fairness, so are the father-son rule, and so is the bidding system. So, as long as we can just know that it's not, I'm hanging shit on just one, all of it sucks. Draft should be open slather. Don't mind that at all, but that's not the point of this video, okay? But in terms of the small forwards, it's Joe Berry in an open draft. Take Keiko and Champion off the table. It's Joe Berry. And that's about it. In terms of your pure small forwards, when you look at someone like a Taj Houghton, you look at someone like a Tom Gross, who can go rotate through that forward midfielder role. Think about it like this, if you will, right? Think of Joe Berry as like a Nick Watson, if you will. Not in terms of how they play, but your small forward. Now, Nick Watson at Hawthorn's been allowed to get up the ground, but when you think of that kind of mercurial small forward who can hit the scoreboard, whereas your Taj Houghton and your Tom Gross are kind of like your Dylan Moores. Yes, they can hit the scoreboard. Dylan Moore's not a small forward. He's a high half forward. Joe Berry is your pure small forward, and there are not many of them in this draft at that top end. So whoever gets him at whatever point is going to get the best open draft player at a position, which is a really good thing to get in the draft. Good news is all of these clubs that are going to be around the mark where I think he is going to go in this draft all need a player of that position. So happy dance for Joe Berry, because I reckon he is going to go higher than we suspect, because so many clubs are going to go, there's not really that big of a gap maybe between the 5th best midfielder in this draft and the 12th. Therefore, we can go other position first and then midfielders later on in the draft. And then you might see the draft stocks of some midfielders that I'm going to mention in this video and not mention in this video later on down the road. Think of someone like a Zach Johnson, for example, could go to a club with their second pick, maybe more than a first pick, if they've addressed another positional need. And I'm a massive fan of Zach Johnson, by the way, but back to the topic at hand, Joe Berry, if there's one man in the draft who should be ultra thankful for the Next Generation Academy rules, it's him. Because his skill at his position is now premium. And I hope he enjoys day one of the draft, as I hope everyone that gets picked up obviously will. I mentioned this bloke just before, but Tom Gross is starting to become a bit of a pain in a top 20 mock because of how different he is popping up between conversations, experts, and all these kinds of things. Now, I've already mentioned in this video that I still do trust my intuition more than any others, because it wouldn't be Daz Talks Footy's mock draft. It would be an amalgamation of everyone else's ideas just pasted together, and frankly, I don't really have the time to trust someone else more than myself. I'm going to go with my opinions, right? But I do like talking to people about the draft, and I've had people that have said Tom Gross is top 15. I've had people that have said Tom Gross is top 25, and I had one draft person who I spoke to a lot throughout the process last year whose opinions have turned out to be pretty damn spot on at this point in time, that's told me that Tom Gross is outside of the top 30. So when you've got someone that's got quite a diverse range of drafting, well, range, if you will, that becomes, like I said, a bit of a pain, tongue-in-cheek with the theme of this video, right? I, however, am kind of on the other end with Tommy Gross. I love him as a player at this point in time. And I do not say that with any kind of disrespect in the slightest. And I don't think that Tom Gross is going to be able to, or any other player that I love in this draft, is going to do some things that are going to make me actively not like them. I'm not someone who goes around bashing 18-year-old prospects. I think there are some boom-bust players in this draft, and that may be well worth a video, but I'm not actively going to come out here and go, this player's going to be a bust, because that would be ridiculous. But with how deep the range for Tom Gross is going, there really does introduce a question of, will clubs target needs in the draft more than wants, considering how even it is? I feel like Tom Gross is so difficult to mock as well, because he could be the perfect trade-up target. Think of a club of someone like a Port Adelaide, for example, might take their picks, trade up to grab someone like him if he's higher up their draft board than someone else, right? And when you look at the clubs that could be in contention for Tommy G, he effectively could go anywhere. And that's part of making this job difficult, which is what makes it so bloody fun. Sometimes blokes are a pain because you can't figure out what their position is. Well, Matt Whitlock fits this perfectly because he's a defender. I know he went forward when Jack wasn't there, and they even played a game forward with he and Jack where he kicked 5, but he went down back on the weekend after the carnival. He had 25 disposals and 12 marks last week, and I know one performance like that, it would be hypocritical for me to go, based on that, he's a defender. Because you could argue with 2 performances up forward, he should be a forward. So I'm not going to sit here and go, if you think he's a forward, you're wrong. All I can say is that I think at AFL level, Matt Whitlock is going to be a defender. And here's the thing. A lot of teams need a key defender. And the best news for the key defenders in the draft, you think of him, you think of Harry O'Farrell, these kind of guys, is that good teams in the competition need key defenders as well. Hello, Sydney, if you're listening, who desperately need a key defender that they can develop as quickly as possible. And with the clubs that could be interested in Matt as well, if AFL clubs can knuckle down what he's best at, and I think they're going to do that, obviously, they're going to find themselves an athletic back shoulder key defender who can take an intercept mark, who will need to, eat, sleep and breathe in the gym a little bit. But again, 18-year-olds, guys. Let's go a little bit easy on them. But in terms of where he's going to go, he and Harry O'Farrell are giving me some headaches at the moment. But I think I've talked about Harry a bit more than Matt so far, so he can have this spot on the list. But if clubs think he's a tall forward, well, that's a whole nother pain, isn't it, for me? So welcome to the list, Matt, and if you or anyone you know could give me a definitive answer on where you are positionally best suited, that would be great. Would make my life a lot easier, but I love watching him as a defender, I really do. And then last but not least is Christian Moraes, who I was pretty high on come the start of the year, and I don't want to say that I've dropped off him because I have mocked him to the Giants a couple of times, and then he didn't make my July ranking. And look, ball use is part of that. I do see him a little bit as a Bailey Smith type, who I know went pick 6 in his draft year, but the concerns about the ball use, especially in the forward half, are a little bit justified at this point. I think the star-studded Vic Metro lineup hurt him a little bit, and I definitely think a bit like Henry Hustwaite in his draft year, and I've talked about the Hawks quite a bit in this video, I apologise, but I think we're going to go, this looks like a steal, which Henry looked at the time and is still developing at the Hawks. And then after the Carnival, he was definitely a guy that I've got written in my notes of watch him. And then what he did on the weekend, he had 27 disposals, 6 marks, 6 inside 50s, 5 goals, 2 against the Western Jets. Like, wow. And then you look at this guy who I think in the power rankings as well was kind of in the 20s for both of Cal and Jasper of ESPN and AFL.com.au respectively, although we should be flipping them. But anyway, I love Christian more than most, but it's difficult for me to judge of when he was in a team with other really good players, he wasn't getting a starting midfield role and he wasn't really finding the footy as prolifically as he does in his under-18s team, which means will a really good club be able to get the most out of him? Maybe not, which kind of makes me think early second round. You know, I know Carlton have got their father-sons, but using them as an example, Carlton don't really have that definitive third midfielder at this point in time. Hewitt, Kennedy, Chera, through injury form and being the sub, they haven't really nailed that down, I don't think. Jack Carroll looks like he won't be at the Blues anymore. Now, I know they're going to get Ben Camporeale for that midfield role, so Carlton is a bad example, but not too many good teams in the competition don't have that definitive third midfielder spot up for grabs. So if it's not the perfect example, sue me. You look at some mid-tier clubs, Hawthorn don't need that midfielder at 18. Bailey Smith would be great for the experience, but Hawthorn don't need another 18-year-old with McKenzie, Ward, Hustwaite, these guys that are Cam McKenzie who already can't get a game. So Hawthorn don't need to introduce another 18-year-old there. Collingwood would be a really good fit for Christian Moraes, I think, as well as these other clubs. But in terms of, is he going to go in the top 10? I don't think so. I don't think there are enough clubs in that mid-range that would pick him up. They would need someone like a Richmond, for example, if they are going to trade Shea Bolton and get those extra picks in, although Richmond's hand is already awesome, in order to snap him up as a part of Richmond's generation next. Because if there's a midfield trio at the moment that are just not working at all, it's Hopper, Taranto, and Prestia. But those are the 6 boys who currently, as someone that is doing mock drafts once a month, is finding it difficult to find their place, which is great because I love how open this draft is. Is there any other players you can think of that you are struggling to get a gauge on, or do you have a draft question for me? Throw it in the comments. I love responding to everyone as best that I can. I hope you are having an amazing start to your week. We're at hump day by the time this goes out, so I hope that your week is a very happy one and you look after yourselves, you absolute legends, because you deserve to be here, you deserve to be happy, and you are an absolute superstar. I've got my round 22 preview coming out tomorrow. They've been a lot of fun, so look forward to that. And if you've got someone who's interested in draft content, why don't you send them Daz's way and get them to click the subscribe button like you should be as well. Take it easy, guys, and I'll see you later.